Margaret stood in the doorway of that county hospital ward, unrecognizable after losing 90 pounds and becoming strong. There he was, Robert, the man who once screamed, "You're too fat to visit sick people." Now he lay there skeletal, abandoned, with no one to change his diaper or bring him water. Their eyes met across that sterile room. He didn't recognize the transformed woman standing before him. His voice was barely a whisper. "Please, nurse, help me. I'm so alone." Margaret took a deep breath, her heart pounding like thunder. After all the humiliation, all the cruel words, all those years of being told she was worthless, here was her moment of truth. "I'm not a nurse," she said quietly, stepping closer to his bed. "I'm your wife." The shock in his eyes was something she'd never forget. What happened next, nobody expected. Not the doctors, not the nurses, and certainly not Robert himself. Margaret's hands trembled as she clutched her purse tight, walking down that sterile hospital hallway. The smell of disinfectant mixed with her mum's favorite perfume still lingered on her clothes from their morning visit. She was trying so hard to be strong for her mama, lying there all weak and pale in that hospital bed. That's when she heard those heavy footsteps behind her. Oh Lord, she knew that walk anywhere. Robert was coming down the hall, and from the way he was stumbling, she could tell he'd been drinking again. Her heart started beating fast, that nervous kind of beat when you know trouble's coming your way. "Margaret!" His voice boomed through that quiet corridor like thunder on a clear day. Every single person in that hallway turned to look. Nurses stopped mid-step, visitors froze, and Margaret just wanted the floor to swallow her whole. "You're too fat to visit sick people." Robert's words cut through the air like a knife. "You're gonna scare the other patients half to death." Margaret felt her cheeks burning with shame. She tried to make herself smaller, tried to disappear, but there was nowhere to hide. A young nurse looked at her with such pity in her eyes, and that made it hurt even worse. "Look at the size of this woman," Robert kept going, his voice getting louder and meaner. "She looks like she's gonna break every chair in this place." The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret stood there feeling like every eye in that hallway was judging her, measuring her, finding her wanting. She just wanted to run, to disappear, to wake up from this nightmare. But what the doctor told Margaret that very same day was going to change everything forever. Little did she know, this moment of pure humiliation was just the beginning of a journey that would transform not just her body, but her entire life in ways she never could have imagined. After Robert's cruel scene in the hallway, Margaret was sitting in the waiting area trying to pull herself together when Dr. Johnson appeared beside her. His face was serious, the kind of serious that makes your stomach drop before he even opens his mouth. "Ma'am, I need to be straight with you," he said quietly, motioning toward his office. "Can we talk privately for a moment?" Margaret followed him on shaky legs, her heart already knowing this wasn't going to be good news. The doctor closed the door and gestured for her to sit down. She could hear her own heartbeat in her ears as he pulled up her test results on his computer screen. "Margaret, your blood work came back, and I'm not going to sugarcoat this," Dr. Johnson said, his voice gentle but firm. "You've got severe diabetes, your blood pressure is dangerously high, and your heart is working overtime just to keep you going." The words hit her like a freight train. She felt the room spinning, her hands getting cold and clammy. "If you don't lose 90 pounds in the next 6 months, the doctor continued, looking her straight in the eyes, "you could have a heart attack or stroke. I'm talking life or death here." Margaret walked out of that office feeling like she was floating in a nightmare. Her legs felt like jelly, and her mind was racing with fear. That's when she ran into Robert in the parking lot. "So what did the doctor say?" he asked, not even looking concerned. "He said I need to lose weight or I could—" she started, her voice breaking. Robert just laughed, that cruel laugh that cut deep. "Now they're making up stories that fat people die young. Doctors just want your money, Margaret." And when she decided to fight for her own life, she didn't know she was saving 2 lives. That night, Margaret couldn't sleep. Dr. Johnson's words kept echoing in her mind. Life or death. She stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of her own body pressing down on the mattress, and made a decision that would change everything. At 5 in the morning, she got up and put on her old sneakers. Her neighbor, Mrs. Dorothy, was already out watering her flowers when Margaret stepped onto the sidewalk for her first walk in years. "Well, I'll be," Mrs. Dorothy said with a warm smile. "You're up early, honey." "Doctor says I gotta lose weight or I'm gonna die," Margaret said, her voice shaking. Mrs. Dorothy's face turned serious, and right then and there, she became Margaret's unofficial trainer. "Then we're gonna fight this together," Mrs. Dorothy said firmly. The first week was pure torture. Margaret's body screamed for the food she'd given up. Her legs ached after just 10 minutes of walking. She'd come home exhausted, sweating, wanting to quit every single day. But Mrs. Dorothy was always there, teaching her simple exercises, counting her steps, cheering her on. After a month of this suffering, Margaret stepped on the scale and couldn't believe her eyes. 20 pounds gone. 20! She felt a spark of hope she hadn't felt in years. But Robert, oh Lord, Robert was determined to crush that hope. He'd come home with boxes of donuts, leave them right on the kitchen counter where she couldn't miss them. "Come on, Margaret," he'd say with that cruel smile. "One little donut ain't gonna hurt." When she'd go out for her morning walks, he'd holler from the porch, "Look at you huffing and puffing like a train. This whole diet thing is just foolishness." But while she fought to live, Robert was digging his own grave. 3 months into her journey, Margaret had lost 45 pounds, and honey, let me tell you, she was like a whole different person. She'd wake up with energy she hadn't felt in years, practically bouncing out of bed for her morning walks with Mrs. Dorothy. Her clothes were getting loose, her face was glowing, and she could climb the stairs without getting out of breath. But Robert, oh, that man was going in the complete opposite direction. Every morning he'd light up his first cigarette before his feet even hit the floor, coughing something awful. He'd spend his evenings at the corner bar, coming home reeking of beer and tobacco, stumbling through the house like a man half his age shouldn't be doing. "Look at you," he'd say, looking Margaret up and down with those cold eyes. "Still ugly, just skinnier. You think losing weight's gonna make you beautiful? Think again." Those words stung, but they didn't stop her like they used to. Margaret was finding something inside herself she'd forgotten existed: strength. Meanwhile, Robert's cough was getting worse by the day, deep rattling sounds that echoed through the house at night. He'd wake up exhausted, dragging himself around like every step was a burden. Mrs. Dorothy noticed it too. "That man needs to see a doctor," she'd whisper to Margaret during their walks. But when Margaret suggested it, Robert would just wave her off. "It's nothing but allergies," he'd grunt, lighting another cigarette. The man was falling apart right before her eyes, but he was too stubborn and proud to admit something was wrong. He kept eating his greasy food, drinking his beer, smoking his cigarettes like he was invincible. And when she reached the doctor's goal, an unexpected twist happened that nobody saw coming. 6 months later, Margaret stepped onto Dr. Johnson's scale and watched his eyes widen in amazement. 90 pounds gone. 90. She was like a butterfly that had finally broken out of her cocoon, transformed into someone she barely recognized in the mirror. "Margaret, this is incredible," Dr. Johnson said, looking at her test results. "Your diabetes is under control, blood pressure normal, and your heart is strong as a horse. You've literally saved your own life." She walked out of that doctor's office feeling 10 feet tall. For the first time in years, she bought herself new clothes that actually fit her new body. She got her hair done, put on a little makeup, and started taking care of herself like she mattered. But Robert, Lord have mercy, that man was getting more uncomfortable by the day. He'd watch her getting ready in the morning, see her confidence growing, and it ate away at him like poison. "Don't think you're something special now," he'd snarl, following her around the house. "You're still the same worthless woman I married. A little weight loss ain't gonna change that." But his words didn't have the same power over her anymore. Margaret was finding her voice, standing a little straighter, looking people in the eye when she talked to them. Mrs. Dorothy would beam with pride every time she saw her. "You're like a whole new person, honey," Mrs. Dorothy would say during their walks. The cruel comments got worse as Margaret got stronger. Robert would criticize everything she did, from the way she cooked to the way she walked. He was like a man watching his control slip away, and he didn't know how to handle it. But when he woke up coughing blood, everything changed in ways nobody could have expected. It was a Tuesday morning when Margaret heard the thud from the bathroom. She rushed in and found Robert collapsed on the floor, his face pale as a ghost, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "Robert! Robert! Can you hear me?" she called, her hands shaking as she grabbed the phone to call for help. The ambulance ride felt like a nightmare. Robert was unconscious, hooked up to machines, and Margaret sat there holding his hand despite everything he'd put her through. All those years of cruelty, and here she was, the only one by his side. Dr. Martinez didn't waste time with gentle words. "Ma'am, I need to be direct with you. Your husband has advanced lung cancer. Years of heavy smoking and drinking have taken their toll. The cancer has spread to his lymph nodes." Margaret felt the world spinning around her. The man who had tormented her for so long was now fighting for his life. "What does that mean?" she whispered. "He's gonna need intensive care, someone dedicated to help him through this." Dr. Martinez said, his voice serious. "The treatments are going to be rough and he'll need constant supervision." That's when Robert's family showed their true colors. His brother Tom came to the hospital once, took one look at Robert hooked up to those machines and shook his head. "We don't have time to care for sick people," Tom said coldly. "We got our own lives to worry about." His drinking buddies from the bar? They vanished like smoke. Neighbors who used to chat with him suddenly had somewhere else to be when they saw Margaret coming. Robert, once so arrogant and cruel, was now begging for basic help. And when everyone abandoned him in his darkest hour, only one person remained. The next few days showed Margaret just how alone Robert really was. His brothers Tom and Mike came by the hospital exactly once more, looked uncomfortable as could be, and made their excuses. "We don't have time to care for sick people," Tom repeated, not even looking Robert in the eye. "We got our own families, our own problems. You understand?" Mike just nodded along, both of them backing toward the door like they couldn't wait to escape. "Sorry, Robert, hope you get better soon." And just like that, they were gone. Robert's drinking buddies from Murphy's bar, they disappeared faster than morning fog. These men who used to laugh at his cruel jokes about Margaret, who'd slap him on the back and buy him another round, suddenly had no time for a sick friend. The phone never rang. No visitors came by. Even the neighbors who used to chat with Robert about football and complain about the weather would cross the street when they saw Margaret coming. They'd suddenly find something very interesting to look at on the other side of the road. Robert, the man who once strutted around like he owned the world, was now reduced to begging for basic help. "Please, Margaret," he whispered from his hospital bed, his voice weak and raspy. I can't do this alone. Please don't leave me." Margaret stood there looking at this broken man, remembering every cruel word, every humiliation, every time he'd made her feel worthless. She had every right to walk away, every right to let him face this alone like he'd made her face so many things. Mrs. Dorothy squeezed her hand. "Whatever you decide, honey, I'll support you." And in the darkest night of his life, she made a decision that changed everything. That night, Margaret went home to an empty house that felt colder than winter. She sat at her kitchen table, the same table where Robert had crushed her dreams so many times, and wrestled with the biggest decision of her life. Her heart was torn right down the middle. One side screamed for justice. Let him suffer alone like he'd made her suffer. Remember the hospital humiliation? Remember too fat to visit sick people? Remember every cruel laugh, every nasty comment? But then she'd remember her wedding day, standing before God and promising, "In sickness and in health." Those vows felt heavy as stones in her chest. She couldn't sleep. At 3 in the morning, she got dressed and drove to Grace Community Church. Pastor Williams found her there, sitting in the front pew, tears streaming down her face. "Pastor, I don't know what to do," she whispered. "He hurt me so bad for so many years. How can I take care of someone who treated me like dirt?" Pastor Williams sat beside her, his voice gentle but firm. "Margaret, forgiveness ain't about what he deserves. Hey, it's about who you choose to be. Love your enemies, do good to those who hurt you. That's what separates us from the world." She prayed until dawn broke, wrestling with God like Jacob wrestled the angel. Finally, peace settled over her heart like a warm blanket. Margaret stood up, wiped her tears, and made her decision. She'd care for Robert, not because he deserved it, but because love was stronger than hate, because her Christian faith demanded it. But what happened when she became nurse to her own tormentor surprised everyone, including herself. Margaret walked into that hospital room the next morning like a soldier reporting for duty. She'd made her choice, and now she was going to live by it, no matter how hard it got. And honey, it was harder than anything she'd ever done. Robert was so weak he couldn't even lift his head off the pillow. She had to help him eat, spoon by spoon, like feeding a baby. She gave him baths, changed his clothes, administered his medicine on schedule. The worst part, changing his diapers when he couldn't make it to the bathroom. This man who'd once called her too fat to visit sick people now depended on her for the most basic human dignity. But Margaret did it all with gentle hands and a quiet heart. She slept in that uncomfortable hospital chair night after night, her back aching something fierce. Nurses would offer to call someone else, but Margaret would just shake her head. "He's my husband, this is where I belong." One evening, after she'd helped him with his medicine and adjusted his pillows for the 10th time that day, Robert looked up at her with tears in his eyes. "Margaret," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Why are you doing this? After everything I put you through, why are you here?" She sat down beside his bed, looked him straight in the eyes and said something that surprised even her. Because I learned that loving means caring, not humiliating. I learned that real strength comes from lifting people up, not tearing them down. Robert started crying then, deep sobs that shook his whole body, years of cruelty melting away in those tears. And when he recovered and saw who she had become, the transformation was complete. 6 months later, Robert was sitting up in bed, color back in his cheeks, looking like a man who'd been given a second chance at life. But more than that, he looked like a man who'd found his soul again. "Margaret," he said one afternoon, reaching for her hand with tears in his eyes, "I need to say something I should have said months ago. You saved me when I didn't deserve it. After all the cruel things I did, all the pain I caused you, you stayed. You cared for me like I was worth something." Margaret squeezed his hand gently. She'd forgiven him completely. But something else had happened during those long hospital nights. She'd fallen in love with John, the night nurse who'd worked alongside her, who'd brought her coffee during those difficult hours and treated her with the kindness she'd never known she deserved. "Robert, I need to tell you something too," she said softly. "I'm going to be moving out. John and we're getting married." Instead of anger, Robert's face filled with something beautiful, genuine happiness for her. "Margaret, you deserve to be happy with someone who values you from day one, someone who sees what I was too blind to see all those years." A year later, Margaret walked down the aisle of Grace Community Church in a simple white dress, radiant with joy. Mrs. Dorothy was her maid of honor, dabbing tears from her eyes. And there in the third pew sat Robert, respectfully dressed, genuinely smiling as he watched the woman who'd saved his life find the love she'd always deserved. The transformation was complete. 2 hearts had been reborn, hers through strength and forgiveness, his through humility and grace. This story shows us that sometimes our greatest trials become our greatest triumphs. Margaret's journey from humiliation to transformation proves that we all have the power to change our lives, no matter how hopeless things seem. Her physical transformation was just the beginning. The real change happened in her heart when she chose love over revenge. But here's what really moves me. Margaret didn't just save her own life when she lost that weight. She saved her soul when she chose to forgive. And in doing so, she saved Robert's soul too. That's the kind of love that changes the world, one heart at a time. Now I want to ask you something important. What prison are you living in? What's holding you back from becoming the person you were meant to be? Is it fear, resentment, the cruel voices of people who don't see your worth? The truth is this. You have the same strength Margaret found. You have the same choice she had. You can choose to let your pain define you, or you can choose to let it refine you. Which will it be? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss these life-changing stories. And click on the video appearing on your screen right now to continue watching more inspiring tales that will touch your heart and transform your life. Your journey to a better you starts with the very next choice you make.